Hi, I'm Senator Joe Robach, and welcome to Senate News and Views. Today we're kind of having the tables turned a little bit, if you will. I have the opportunity to have some dialogue and maybe conduct an interview of what I think might be very, very important for folks at home in Monroe County to learn about not only our efforts in the budget and what we're trying to do to build up New York and get things done in our area, but also have the opportunity to talk to Joe Leone, who is an expert, not only working in the building trades, but now the head of Unicon, a great organization we have in our area to try and steer things the right way and make things go. So, Joe, I want to welcome you first and foremost.
Thank you for having me here, Senator.
Thanks for taking the time out to talk a little bit. And before we get into one of our big pushes on trying to get parity and roads and bridge money, tell us a little bit about what Unicon is and what they do, who it's made up of.
Absolutely. Unicon is a joint labor management association. It's a multi-craft labor association for the construction industry. We advocate for capital construction in the Finger Lakes region overall and do what we can to try to improve the quality of life in the region.
And I would really say that I don't know if other regions have that, but I think unique to us, I've always appreciated as an elected official and someone who works with a lot of people in the community. You've been a good voice, not only to lend your expertise, but really weigh in when it's appropriate and help move things in the right direction. So I'll say thank you, and I should notice because your title up there doesn't say that you are, I'm not sure what, are you the executive director?
Executive director, yes.
Executive director of Unicon now, and I want to thank you for all you do. And certainly you've been a leader, your organization, of highlighting and addressing the great need we need for infrastructure as chairman of the Transportation Committee and being a lifelong resident of our area. I concur with you and appreciate the help. Why don't you, I guess in your terms, for you and your members, people you represent, talk about the parity issue a little bit, where we're at, why you think it's important.
Absolutely. Well, first, to respond to, it is a unique organization. Being a multi-craft labor management association is very rare. And in addition to just the crafts, organized labor, all of the contractors associated with that, the engineering community, all come together in this association, this coalition of people related to the construction industry. The investments in, especially in infrastructure and transportation, now is the time. Now is a critical time. The federal government just created, a 5-year budget, and a 5-year budget is very important to the industry. It creates stability. And I'm glad to hear that the legislature, the governor, and the executive proposal are talking about long-term proposals, 5-year budget plans. Mm-hmm. The governor did also talk about parity between the MTA and the DOT capital plans. And I want to be clear, that's really not an upstate-downstate conversation. Mm-hmm. 20%, I believe, of the current DOT budget is for downstate. Mm-hmm. So the Department of Transportation needs this critical funding. And I believe but it's not parity. Right. The governor's proposal calls for $26 billion roughly in MTA and $22 billion in DOT. Of the $22 billion, there's at least roughly $2 billion that's already spoken for. That brings us down to about 20. And I recognize that the city of New York has invested heavily into the 26 million piece. But even when you move all the numbers around, it isn't parity.
Right. Well, I would thank you, and I think we concur. And I would even roll it back even further. So 2 things have happened. One's pragmatic, one's politics. Pragmatically, we all know, not only in New York, but in the entire Northeast, we have an aging infrastructure, roads, bridges, even one step further, which part of this is about, how we deliver water, all kinds of different public works projects who really kind of haven't been addressed or addressed adequately. And I say this, and I guess I feel so strongly about it, out of my entire time in the legislature, it's only been 2 years where there hasn't been some political balance, meaning only one party controlled everything. And when the Republicans were not in control in 8-9 of the state Senate. The governor was Democrat. The assembly's been Democrat since the beginning of time, I always say. We really broke that parity that always existed prior to that when we weren't in control with the MTA every year. So we're almost working back to get back to fairness. And I would say, not only do I think it's the right thing to do pragmatically, but I guess as someone who is proudly from Rochester and upstate New York, I think our New York City, quite frankly, Democratic colleagues gave us a bad deal and have been somewhat reluctant to rectify it. So the governor's now said, we have parities, acknowledged it, even mentioned some of my complaining in a speech in Rochester, and I'm glad to see that. But you're right, we have to make the numbers match up a little bit better for complete fairness, because while we're talking on the right track, the city of New York has put in $2.5 billion of the 26. That takes them down to 23.5. We're more at 22. We'd like to see that number get a lot closer, and I'm hopeful that we can. There's no question when you look at some of the bridges we have that are aging, some of the work that we need to do. We've been able to address some of it, but we do need a long-range plan, which is good that we're talking about 5 years, but it has to be funded in real dollars and fairly. And even people, and I want to talk about this in a minute, who just drive cars need to do that. But there's also a huge economic impact as well by driving that fairness. Just in the building trades alone, how many people work in construction?
Oh, roughly, just in the Rochester building trades region, about 15,000 workers,
Right.
hundreds, I don't have the exact number, hundreds of construction companies.
Right. It's a lot of families,
It is
lots
a
of
lot of
jobs, and also we know that this work really needs to get done.
It does.
I'm also hopeful, and you know, the governor has talked about this whole build and $100 billion over 5 years. Some of it would be federal money, but off saying, because I try to be very pragmatic and realistic and not promise what we can't deliver, I'm not sure where all this money is going to come from. But it's good that we're going to do that, and he's talked about investing in a lot of other things, but certainly it seems to me that if we're throwing around those kind of dollars over 5 years, that certainly we got to be able to mix and match a little bit to get a little bit more priority.
We're talking about a lot of money.
Right.
There's a lot of money here. And to back up to, yes, up until about 2009, there was parity between the MTA capital budget and the DOT. The numbers were almost identical through all those years. In 2009, that first 5-year projection developed about a $5 billion difference, where the MTA received about $5 billion more than the Department of Transportation.
Right.
This proposal is another $6 billion. So cumulatively over those 10 years, it'll be over an $11 billion differential. It's a big number.
Yeah.
And
I say this because some people will accuse me of being anti-New York City.
No.
I'm really not. I'm just for it. I understand the large amount of people that the MTA moves and how important that subway system is. But, as I say, our roads and bridges are what take our people to work, to school, to the hospital and everything else, and that's equally is important to us. So this is a battle that I think we're hell-bent on trying to win. I've appreciated all your help of your organization. We've had consortium of people come together, highway superintendents, engineering firms, everyday interested citizens, people that know we just need these safer roads and bridges.
Yes.
So I think we're moving it in the right direction. We're a couple months out, and of course, beauty's in the eyes of the beholder. The governor's trying to say that with some of the other things going on and the money that New York City puts in, we're already at parity. I think we can show a little different argument and hopefully get that number increased a little bit. And even then, getting the money out the door and highlighting the right amount of projects with some geographic balance, we'll still have our work cut out for us. But the good news is there really is, for lack of a better term, a lot of open transparent dialogue on it. And I'm hoping that's going to end up in a good result.
I agree. That is the good. The good news is everyone's talking about it. Everyone recognizes this. This is a significant need. This isn't just a want. There's an organization out there called Transportation of America, rates roads and bridge conditions across the nation. Rochester, in its range, in its region of mid-sized cities, is ranked fifth in the nation for the deficient or poor condition of its bridges. Mm-hmm. This is a significant issue.
Right.
It won't take much for us to get back in gear with this thing. We just have to stay focused, keep the conversation going, and try to allocate as much money as we can to the Department of Transportation's capital budget. MTA is very critical for the people downstate, and again, I want to reiterate, it's not an upstate-downstate conversation. It's two capital plans, and New York City's in both of them, as is the rest of the state and the DOT. And the DOT just doesn't have the resources it needs to allocate to the needs that we have currently in our region.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're going to get to a reasonably good spot on that. Mm-hmm. And I think there are, while we're happy for the $20 billion, no one's saying that's okay. The governor's saying it's 22, which I guess technically it is, but $1 billion of that would be going to the thruway,
yep.
And $1 billion going to the Tappan Zee Bridge, which I guess is legitimately a DOT project.
Which is also throughway, by the way.
But kind of, yes. Right. And, I think, I don't want to call it politics, but this is where parochial pragmatism comes into play, that one bridge took $4 billion that wasn't absolutely necessary to do yet, and yet we know there's bridges in upstate New York that are very deficient, or even smaller canal bridges that if the state doesn't fix, no one's going to. And while they may not impact quite as many people, I have no canal bridges in my district. I think it's tremendously unfair for people to have to drive around 20 minutes or to think that a fire truck or an emergency vehicle won't be able to take the most expeditious route because we're not putting our priorities in the right order. I think is a very compelling argument for us to win. So hopefully, I will say this, with Unicon, you leading that, your organization, many other people speaking up, we've probably highlighted this more so than any other part of our budget dialogue since 2009.
Right.
And hopefully, for all meritorious reasons, that will happen. I always say that it's very, very important that when we get the budget done, we can explain why we did it and show why it was fair to everybody all over the state. Of course, I take a very parochial position that it's fair to the people I have the honor and privilege of representing.
Well, it could never be done without your help and your support, and you've always been there in support of that, and that's why I think it's important for us to continue to come to you, bring the issues to the front, and hope that you can advocate for us in the best way possible. Right. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, and I feel the same way, and I guess I would just say to people watching this or listening, I think sometimes we just take it for granted that the roads are going to be there, the bridge is going to be open. This is kind of the mechanism for all of us to make sure that those, the potholes aren't there, the road's striped, the bridges are in good shape, traffic's moving clearly, and this is why we get so passionate or put such an importance on this. And hopefully, all working together, we'll have some success. Right. I'm hopeful that this year, for the 6th year in a row, we'll have a budget done on time in an open, transparent way, and hopefully this will be a big part of it. So thank you, Joe, for joining us. We appreciate you watching, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thank you.